So I'm here with Michael Anton, former national security official with the Trump administration. Michael, welcome. I'd like to ask you about Iran. So first of all, maybe going back before COVID-19 was an issue there, but how big of a threat do you think Iran is right now?
Iran historically has been a threat to the United States since the 1979 revolution. The extent of that waxes and wanes. I think the extent to which Iran was, at its worst recently was when we had a major troop presence in Iraq and they were bringing IEDs into the country and militia fighters, and the threat has gone down in part because our presence is so much smaller, but in part because we started to get tough with them. And what we've learned, what the United States has learned and sometimes forgets and has to relearn over those 40 years, is that when you get tough with Iran, they're a risk averse and they tend to back down. They tend to be aggressive when they think they're not going to suffer for it. They're not going to get pushed back. It essentially works, yeah. But as I say, we tend to forget the lesson and get complacent, and then they start to get more and more aggressive, and then we lose patience and we punch them in the nose, and then they back down. So the Soleimani attack was a nose punch. I mean, it was both. It was justified retaliation for what the Iranians had done to our soldiers, specifically under his direction. The Pentagon says that they can account directly for 603 U.S. service member deaths to Soleimani, but it's also an act of deterrence in a sense that deterrence isn't always passive. You can't always just say, well, I'll do this if you do that, and it's always a threat without action, because over time, a threat without action starts to ring hollow to the person being deterred. They have to see in a demonstrable way that you actually will follow through and do something to protect your interests. And Iran, mostly, when they see that concretely, they never back down completely, go away and say we're going to behave nicely forever. But at least, like a turtle, the head retreats into the shell for a time being.
So it seems like most of the president's critics think that basically this has rattled the cage and is asking for some sort of retaliation, but you don't think that's the case?
Well, look, they did their retaliation and it caused no casualties. The president, I think, wisely didn't retaliate to their retaliation, and things have been quiet since then. Now, how long will they be quiet? I don't expect they'll be quiet forever. I think as long as the current regime in Iran is in charge, it's anti-American, anti-Western in outlook to its core. It will find new ways to start probing our defenses or our interests again. But for now, it's not doing that, and the longer that lasts, the better.
And so now enter COVID-19, which seems to suddenly have emerged. Of course, they probably have known about it a little longer, or at least it's been spreading a little bit longer. Do you think that changes the security equation at all, what we've learned in the last
I doubt it makes much difference to us in the sense that there's not a whole lot of global, obviously Iran's heavily sanctioned by the United States. There's not, it's not entirely impossible for U.S. citizens to travel back and forth to Iran.
Right.
But there isn't much of it. And there's certainly no connectivity between our two economies the way there is between, say, the United States and China. The one thing I would say, though, is if a country like this and you have an outbreak, it's going to preoccupy you, and you're going to have to worry about it. I don't know the size of the Iranian problem.
They don't know the size of
I don't know that anyone outside Iran does, and like a lot of governments, whatever they say, I'd be inclined not to believe.
Right.
But, if you're sensible and an Iranian leader, you might be thinking, I need to worry about this more than I need to worry about, say, exporting terror attacks against U.S. interests for the time being.
Well, it seems to be spreading in the region too, probably having started in Iran and spreading from there.
Yeah.
It also seems to be hitting officials in the government, that it's made its way into government circles. So that might change things. So what do you think today is the biggest national security threat for the United States?
It's certainly China, and not that I don't expect conflict with China, war with China, or anything like that, but it's espionage, theft of secrets, both business secrets, corporate secrets, and military and our intelligence secrets. It's technology transfer, intellectual property theft. It's also the way we have foolishly, and President Trump is trying to turn this around, outsourced so much of the production of things we need for national security, for health security, to China, and either let our own ability to produce these things wither away entirely or get so small that we can't keep up with domestic demand. Now we're facing that directly over coronavirus and feeling the pinch. I said that I'm been encouraged by what I've seen White House advisor Peter Navarro talk about.
Yes.
That he's been sounding the alarm for years, saying we went way too far with this, and this is in a way his chance to say I told you so. But I think he has every right to say I told you so, and I think we need to listen to him and start turning that trend around.
So how quickly do you think things could be turned around? I mean, this may be a forced, rapid decoupling as opposed to something gradual.
Yes,
so.
I don't, it's well out of my area of expertise to say how quickly. I mean, I think certain things that we need in the absolute immediate term, we'll turn them around. We'll start making them quickly. In all likelihood, at a much higher marginal cost than we were formerly purchasing them from China, but that's just a cost that will have to be borne, and that cost will come down over time. As for the rest, things in the supply chain of consumer products, that's going to be a business-to-business case where they're going to have to decide for themselves. I think a lot of businesses will want to believe that this will go away quickly and they don't really have to rethink, and others may conclude, I got to get off in front of this right now, and others in the middle will probably conclude, I hope it goes away, but as a hedge, I better at least start shifting part of my production back, because the uncertainty is such that I can't live with a big question mark for 6 months or a year,
right,
and maintain the kind of revenues and earnings that I've been used to.
So I do find it interesting that kind of recognizing the threat of China is one of the few bipartisan issues in the government today. So do you think that leads to quicker action, more ability to act?
I'd like to, but I think it's in a way a kind of fake bipartisanship, because before Trump, we had a bipartisan consensus, and it was a genuine bipartisan consensus that we shouldn't really worry that much about China.
Right.
Trade with China is good for business, it's good for America, it's good for our corporations, it's good for the markets. Bill Clinton, in a way, well, actually this goes back years where to the H.W. Bush administration. You could even go back before that and say that American policy toward China has been bipartisan since the Nixon opening in the early 70s. It's just the basis for why the two parties agree on what our policy should be, shifts over time. Trump was not the first major political leader to call out China as a problem, but he was the first to win on it and become president. And he brought the Republicans with him because they bandwagoned with their new leader. And the Democrats, I think, realized, oh, golly, seems to be popular. It's working for him. We can't let him outflank us on this. And so they're talking like him. But I wonder the extent to which they're serious about it. They're always talking out of two sides of their mouths when they talk about the president. So, for instance, on coronavirus, the latest Democratic talking point seems to be Trump hasn't done enough, and everything he does is xenophobic and racist and will harm the American economy. Like, you can't have it both ways. Sorry.
Well, there have been Democrats who've been strong for years on China in terms of the human rights side of things.
The human rights side of
Pelosi,
the human rights side of things. But there used to be Democrats who are strong on China, on the trade, specifically on the trade issue and protecting American workers, like Dick Gephardt, above all. If there are any of them left in Congress, I don't know who they are. I mean, the Democratic Party over my lifetime has become, every year I look, it's more and more a coastal party, an information economy party, a financial party, a banking industry party, right? And all of those interests want to see the greatest amount of interconnectedness between the US and China, including, this has always been baffling to me, and I'd still like somebody to explain to me why some of the industries whose tech gets ripped off by China at the highest degree and really suffer from this are the most supportive of integration with China. I mean, Apple's a great example. Now we know why Apple, because the iPhones were built there, but in Chinese cities have copied not just the products, they've copied Apple stores.
Right.
And if there's one thing I know about Silicon Valley, it's that they are super sensitive to intellectual property issues. It's the one thing they really want the federal government to crack down on. But they're very ambivalent or divided on this question when it comes to China because they have so much of their own production based there, and because they salivate at the prospect of that consumer market.
It's such
and
a
so they
gigantic market,
they're implicit. They would never admit this, of course, but it seems to me it's hard to avoid that they've made an implicit calculation in their own head that suffering the IP and other theft is a price you have to pay for that outsourcing production and access to the market.
Very interesting. All right, well, thank you
Thank you
very much, Michael Anton.